I'm Derek Nicholson, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome you to our program, Compassion Fatigue 2021. There's never been a more appropriate time for this particular program, even though it's been run in Toronto for 15 years. We have to agree that this has been an unbelievably challenging year for the whole world. It's been particularly challenging for the people who are on the front line. And we're glad to welcome you here, including lawyers who also have challenges with their clients under these challenging times, trying to help them. We've got three great speakers, and they're all world-known. Dr. Gautam, Elizabeth Manley from the 1988 Olympics, and Dr. Sogge. And without further ado, we hope this program will assist you and your clients/patients. All the best.
It's an honor to advocate for our community so that those in future traumatic incidents are protected and covered in every way they deserve when they need it most. This advocacy and support extend to our medical and legal community. Our priority is to advocate for clients and support the medical and legal community to protect their integrity and represent the client's best interests.
It's a pleasure to be here. I want to start by thanking Gluckstein lawyers and to let them know how grateful I am and their efforts to put compassion at the heart of all that they do, as well for offering this conference and giving back to the community in such a tangible way. I'm going to be speaking about the power of resilience. It's my pleasure to be here to add to the conversation today. What I would like to focus on today is looking at how working through the COVID pandemic has certainly added to the level of stress that we have. Going to help us think about defining and understanding concepts like stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue that have certainly been even more of an issue during this pandemic. I would like to help us think about a framework for resilience, the 5 C's that will help us understand and manage our stress more effectively. And finally, also have us thinking a little bit about what can happen in the workplace for us to be able to support each other more effectively during this time. This has been quite the year. There has been rapid, unmatched change, and we're living in what we call a VUCA world, where there's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And working in all of our professions, and whether we're, working in a profession themselves, or we are actually caregivers and working within our home with our family, all of that is very physically difficult and psychologically demanding. And what we're seeing is an increased level of stress, challenges, fatigue, and anxiety. And the important thing to remember is that this impacts all of us, right? That we're all going through this together. And what is the impact for us? If we're working, then there have been lots of concerns about workload, about productivity, about finances. In the past year, many of us have had changes to our work and to our workload. We've had to find and learn and adapt very quickly, often overnight and over the weekend, to different ways of working, and certainly moving to working virtually as well. And sometimes the workload that we do or the responsibilities have had a different profile as well. This is really important because our sense of who we are, our status in the workplace is very highly connected to our contributions and how hard we work. Many of us have had much less contact and connection with our teams and our colleagues in the workplace, which again adds to that feeling of isolation and stress. And sometimes the work is not as interesting, or sometimes it's different and perhaps maybe not the area that we would have liked to have focused on. And all of this in the context of a lot of uncertainty about when is this going to get back to normal. Some of us have been working from home, and that adds a whole new layer of stressors. Ergonomically, our setup is not necessarily ideal for us to be spending hours at our dining table or working from a kitchen chair, and that makes it hard. And just to be able to, work for a full day in that setting, and for many of us in the middle. of everything else. So that makes it hard to have limits. It makes it hard to have boundaries. And so really, one of the things we have to make sure of is that we're not extending our work hour. Some of us are actually working through the time that we otherwise would have been commuting. And that makes it hard too, because we don't actually have that transition, right? That transition into work, the transition back home. And so it's just been big, long days of work, and we're fitting more and more in than we ever thought we could. That's adding to the level of stress for sure. And not only are we working from home, some of us are working parents. And so that means that we're also not just doing our work, but we're also teachers, we're also IT techs for our children, we're also a lot of their social support, certainly adding to the amount of volume of workload that's on us. And some of us are living alone while we're trying to physically distance. And this has been a big concern, the sense of isolation, the difficulty that we've had not being able to connect, which would have been for many of us a big source of how we are supported as we go through things. So lots of stress. Stress is a normal, natural response. If you're feeling stressed, it doesn't mean that you can't do your job or that you're weak in some way. In fact, stress can be very useful, and many of us have used stress in the past effectively. We've leveraged it to allow us to keep going, work longer, push ourselves a little bit more. And so we've learned how to harness it. So having the stress itself is not necessarily the problem. The problem is how we manage that stress. What we want to think about is that there's sort of a spectrum, right? At one end is stress, and at the other extreme, we start to go into what we call distress, which basically is when you can't do what you normally do, right? So you're not your usual level of productivity or your high level of functioning. You just can't go about your usual routine. And here are some of the signs and symptoms of distress: a high level of anxiety, insomnia. In fact, throughout this pandemic, we've seen about 70 to 80% of the population talk about having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. And so insomnia has been a big symptom for us. We feel it in our body, where there's muscle aches and tensions, a sense of irritability and negativity, which sometimes impacts us in our relationships, either our professional as well as our personal relationships, particularly as we're spending more time with people in our household. As a result, sometimes we may not be able to focus or concentrate as well. We're more easily fatigued, and it starts to become demoralizing. This is adapted from the Canadian Armed Forces, their road to mental readiness, and they basically show a continuum where at one side in the green color, we're healthy and we're able to manage how we're feeling, and then we go into the yellow where we're more reactive, into the orange where we're starting to feel a sense of injury, and then we are ill if we have some of the signs and symptoms in the red part of the spectrum. And what we have to look at is recognizing kind of where we are along this continuum, and recognizing also what actions we need to take to be able to deal with this more effectively. So let's talk about some of the words that we're hearing a lot of, and even more so. A lot of professions, a lot of people in the workplace, and often in a virtual workplace, are talking about burnout. What is burnout? Burnout is chronic overstress. And first identified by Mashlash, and it is really related to work. Now, it doesn't have to be work that you're paid for. So certainly working in the home or working as a caregiver, all absolutely fits into this as well. Burnout more likely to occur in situations where people are taking care of others, right? So you can see how this would be something that many of us would fall into. Burnout is not a psychiatric diagnosis, but it can lead to some serious consequences. We start to become overwhelmed, and it can sometimes set us up for things like anxiety and depression. But what is burnout? We've identified 3 big stages of burnout. So the first is emotional exhaustion. So what happens here is that people around us basically see us functioning well. They don't have any idea that there's any problems, and we're really doing everything that we need to be doing, everything that's required of us. So we go through our day, but at the end, we're done. We're drained. We have nothing left to give. And so people will tell me things like, I come home, or I'm, I close my laptop and I go join the family, and I just, put up a newspaper or put up a magazine or a journal, a very tangible message that I don't have anything left for you. Don't talk to me right now. People will say, if I'll come home and I'll, drive into the driveway, I'll turn off my car, and I'll just sit in it for a few minutes, right? Just somehow gathering up some energy to be able to get on with the rest of my day. So that's emotional exhaustion. We do what we need to do, but then we're done, we're drained. Then we move into the second stage of burnout, which is depersonalization. And what happens here is that we start to realize that it's the people in our lives that are the most draining. So what we do is start to limit contact that's not entirely necessary. We start to pull away. We start to withdraw. So again, in the workplace, we're less available. We don't make eye contact in the same way. We would just grab a sandwich at our desk instead of going into a common room. If we go into meetings, we go a little bit late and we leave a little bit early, just so that we don't have to do that social chit-chat stuff that is the draining part. And in our personal lives too, right? That, we get through the end of our week and we really want to just relax. And whereas previously perhaps relaxing meant spending time with people, of course now in the pandemic we haven't been able to do that, but now it's really more in this stage of burnout, just wanting to spend time by myself, right? Just have some time where I'm not responsible, or I don't have to react to anybody else, and I just need to fill up my own tank of energy. And then in the third stage, it starts to impact us with respect to our work. In the third stage of burnout, there's a sense of reduced personal accomplishment. We can't remember what it was about the work we do that we enjoy. We can't get that same sense of positivity or satisfaction from it. And this is a stage where a lot of people actually feel, I'm done. A lot of people think about, do I still want to be doing this? And consider, how can I find something else to do? Now, I had a great mentor in my training that told me you can only do what you're doing well for about 7 years at a time. And then you have to make some change. You have to tweak it somehow, add a little bit, change a little bit, so that you can enjoy it for the next 7 years. But that's a positive, proactive process, right? This stage of burnout is negative, it's reactive. It's, I'm not happy with where I am. I just want to find a way out. Not ideal, in terms of a way to make a decision about a major career change. I want to talk about compassion fatigue. This can coexist with burnout, but is actually somewhat different. So the compassion fatigue is a condition that's characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion. And what we start to feel is a lessened ability to empathize or to feel that compassion that we ordinarily would have for other people. It's really like the negative cost of caring. It starts to take a toll on us. And people describe it as this very profound emotional and physical erosion when we're just not able to refuel, we're not able to regenerate, and we just have nothing left. Sometimes there's secondary traumatic stress where, we listen to trauma from people all around us and we absorb it. And then there's just a limit to how much more we can absorb, how much we can take in and process and come back and take in some more the next day, right? So we start to become fatigued by giving all this compassion. I also want to talk about grief, because this has been a big part of our pandemic. There has been a huge sense of loss as the world has changed. Some of the losses that people have told me about and articulated: a loss of normalcy, right? A loss of consistency, a loss of safety. There's been a loss of connection. We're not connecting with people the way we ordinarily would, and that's meaningful to us. There's been some economic loss, certainly a loss of sense of control. And one of the losses that I've heard over and over again is actually a loss of touch, right? Where I can't wait to, get fully vaccinated, have this behind us, and be able to hug people that are important to us. So as we go through the sense of loss, we grieve. And the stages of grieving have been well defined by Kubler-Ross. We start out by denial. It's very hard, certainly through this pandemic and certainly at the stage of the pandemic, to deny that it's happening. The next stage is anger and protest, right? We're angry, we're frustrated by it, protesting, it shouldn't happen, it's not fair, why can't it be over already? There's some sort of bargaining about what we'll do to, to help have it over before we accept what's going on. We accept the things that we have lost, and we somehow integrate them into our day-to-day life. Now, remember that this is not linear. This is more like a scaffolding to understand what stage you might be at. Also recognize that as we've gone through this year, we've had different losses at different stages. Different aspects of the same loss can hit us as well. So there's really layers of loss and then layers of grief. And at any certain point, you might be at a different stage in this grief process. Also recognize that you're living and working with other people who are at different stages as well, grieving in their own way. David Kessler has added a sixth stage to Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, which is a stage of meaning. And what this is really some hope that even though we've had to go through this difficult time, that perhaps at the end of it, we've gained something from it. We've learned something, and there's been some sense of meaning that we've attained as a result. So just, important for us to allow ourselves to grieve and to acknowledge that is, in fact, what's happening. I'm hearing about mounting frustration. We've had these multiple losses, that sense of fatigue, the burnout that I talked about. I know going into this new year, people were talking about liquid hope, right? The vaccine that was going to somehow solve everything. And that hope has been dashed. There have been variants that we're now having to deal with. There's problems with the vaccine supply and rollout, and we're tired. Right? We're tired of all of the things that I've listed here and more. The pandemic, the distance, the frustrations, and tired of being afraid for people that we care about. And here's really probably my biggest take home, right? That even the healthiest and strongest of us can become unhealthy in an unhealthy environment. You can take any highly functioning person and push them and push them and push them into what for them is unhealthy, and they too are going to become unhealthy, right? None of us are immune to this. And so how do we make sure that we, are thoughtful about how we're doing and that we do some of the things to help ourselves stay well and be resilient? I'm going to offer you a framework. And before I do that, I want you to think about resilience temporally, before, during, and after. So before any event, right? What we want to think about is, are we prepared? Do we have the skills? Do we have the strategies? Have we thought about what we are going to do when we're in a difficult situation? And then during, here we are in the middle of that situation, and how do we harness and leverage those skills and strategies that we have prepared to help us in this situation, which is where we are right now. And then at the end, after, do we bounce back? And resilience, ideally, is not just about bouncing back to where we were before, but actually beyond that, right? Having grown, having learned something from this process, adding in that sense of meaning, and growing actually further. So over the years, as I've worked with professionals in my psychiatric practice and my coaching practice, what I have done is some qualitative research to identify some themes of behaviors that help people stay well, right? It's what I've called the 5 C's of resilience. I'm going to go through each of these with you, but the 5 C's are a sense of control, commitment to the work that we do, a sense of connection, calmness, and caring for ourselves. So let's start with the first, the sense of control, right? What I'm realizing is that, the number one cause of stress is this feeling that we don't have any control. And what happens to us, particularly when we're bright and we're highly functioning, is that we think about this in a logical way. So I look at me, and for example, in my situation, I think, okay, there's me, and I am just, one doctor in this big healthcare system. There's just me, and then there's my patients, and then there's other colleagues in my specialty, and other colleagues in my department, and other colleagues in my hospital, and other colleagues in medicine in Canada, and all around the country, and the patients and the public and the population, not just a little tiny cog in the wheel, right? So logically, it makes sense to focus on the bulk of the problem around me. If I'm only 2% of the problem, then I'm going to focus on this 98% and hope that it improves and changes. What I forget is that control is an illusion. I have no control over anything or anyone around me or outside of me. And so here I am putting all my efforts into 98% that I'm hoping will change. And surprise, I have no control over that, right? Remember I said that sense of lack of control leads to a sense of stress. But if that's the feeling that causes stress, then the solution is to challenge that perception. And so what I need to do is to come back to my 2%. And while it's not very much, it's what I bring into the situation. It's maybe my personality, my hopes, my dreams, my expectations of myself, my expectations of people around me. And while it's not that much, of that 2%, I have 100% control. Right? So one of the things that helps us in terms of managing our stress and staying resilient is identifying that level of control, identifying what I can't control. So for example, through this pandemic, early on, we didn't really have a lot of knowledge of the disease, and we're still not sure as we see variants, how that's changing. We don't have any control over whether your neighbor is following the rules or not. What you do control is what you do, right? What I can do to promote my health, what I can do to promote the health of my coworkers, where I'm getting my information, how much time I spend getting that information. So what you want to do really is to focus on that 2% that you have full control over and start to think about how can I manage and cope with the rest of it. The second C is commitment. So important as we go through this to remember the why. Remember I said to you that at that last stage of burnout, we forget what it was about this that was so meaningful to us. And we start to think about some change, about perhaps leaving what we're doing altogether. So part of how we stay resilient is to remember that why. Why did I choose the work that I do? What drew me to this work? Helps to maybe think about your values. What are my core values, and how does the work I do on a day-to-day basis align with those core values? Some perhaps thought about appreciative inquiry, thinking about, what's good about the work I do? What does a great day at work look like? And what can I do to, have that in every day? And it sometimes takes a time to reflect and to journal. And I want you to think of that, right? I want you to take a minute and reflect on what would be a high point for you in your workday or in your day-to-day activities that make it meaningful. I'm going to share with you, an episode that I think exemplifies that for me. My clinical work is working with other professionals. I work often with colleagues. And, at the very first session, I tell them, if I see you outside of my office, I'm not going to ignore you. I'm going to say hello, but don't ever worry. I'm never going to betray confidentiality. I'm never going to say, see you Tuesday at 2, right? So we're going to stay professional and maintain confidentiality. But I remember when my kids were younger, I also added to that, but if I see you, say at the grocery store or at the university or at the hospital, and I'm with my family and my kids ask, who are you? Or, why don't we just come up with a script? And the script was introducing each other perhaps as a doctor that I work with, right? Which is a very honest, but, appropriately vague way to define our relationship. So several years ago, I was in Toronto. I was sitting in the lobby of this big downtown hotel. I just finished doing a keynote, and I had a colleague come by with her little daughter, who was about 7 or 8. And they were on their way out to shop, and they came by where I was. And this was a colleague that I had taken care of that probably was one of the most depressed, one of the most sick patients that I'd ever had to work with. I worked very hard with her. She worked exceptionally hard and was successful in getting back her health. But I remember how difficult that was for her, for her family. And so as they come by, I'm chatting with her, really happy to see that she's doing so well. And she and her daughter are out. And as we're chatting, her daughter pipes up, "Mom, who's this?" So she said, "Oh, this is Dr. Gautam. This is the doctor that I work with." And, we wrap up our conversation and they continue heading out towards the door. Her little girl is holding her mom's hand, and she holds her mom's hand, and then she looks at me, she looks back at me, and she takes a few more steps, and she looks back at me. She takes a few more steps, and she looks back at me again. And at some point, she lets go of her mom's hand. She comes coming back towards me. So I lean down to talk to her, and she says, "Dr. Gautam, I know who you are. thanks for giving my mom back to me. That is why I do the work I do. I remember that moment. I remember that young girl, and that helps me remember the why. All of you have a story similar to that, where you know you made an impact. And it's so important for us to maintain that thought, that feeling, so that we continue on and have that sense of hope. The meaning of the work we do is huge, right? Our work is such a privilege. People share their stories with us. They allow us into their life at a time, right, when they're struggling. And it's so humbling to be able to make that difference. But in the middle of that stress and crisis, we need to be able to maintain that sense of hope and joy so we can give it, right? The reality is we can't give what we don't have. I really urge you to stay connected to your purpose so that we can have that sense of commitment. We do know why it is that we continue to do this. The next C is caring connections. I want you to think about how do you stay connected with people? And this, again, has never been more important than now through the pandemic. I want to share with you a concept of the holding environment. This is something that we talk a lot about in child psychiatry. And what happens is that as parents, we create this holding environment for babies and young children. So babies are born, we hold them in our hands, we rock them, we take care of them. We anticipate their needs, we meet them even before, they're crying, or we are very good at understanding what they might need and meeting those needs. We make them feel like we're there for them, right? That we have their back. And as a result, children learn to trust. And this is what helps children actually, learn to crawl and crawl away from us and even crawl around the corner, trusting that when they crawl back, we're going to be there. This is what helps children go off the first day of kindergarten or, off to university in a different city, because they trust that we're still there to hold them, right? So we've created this holding environment, which is certainly that sense of trust. I want you to think about, how do you create that for people, not just children, right? And that's part of how we maintain this connection. The social distancing we've been asked to do has sometimes led to social isolation, but that's not necessarily the case. It doesn't need to be like that. For many of us, we used to spend a lot of time traveling, doing group activities. This is, again, how we nurtured ourselves, which has been less available to us. So important to stay connected. How do we do this in the workplace? How do we create that community of caring? Part of it is making sure that we stay connected at a personal level. The emotional bank account is a great concept. This is where, I think about consciously and proactively creating a bank account emotionally with every single person I work with, so that I ask them, I get to know a little bit about themselves. It's not about invading privacy. It's just about being thoughtful. It's just about being curious. It's about being caring about who you work with and getting to know them as people, finding out something about them, finding out that, they have a young child, but then remembering that and then asking them about that child, right? So every time I do that, every time I remember, I ask, I reach out, I share, I'm making a deposit into this emotional bank account. And so hopefully we do this on a regular, thoughtful basis. There might be a day where, I'm stressed, and so maybe I say something that is probably not me at my best. That's okay. That's maybe like a huge, withdrawal, but hopefully we still have enough of a balance in that account that we can continue to have a relationship. So imagine what your workplace would be like if everyone was consciously trying to build this emotional bank account with each other. I want you to think about how you can use peers and colleagues as a network for support. If you're working from home, what about family, friends, neighbors, basically creating that community. There are people available that can help in terms of coaching, in terms of mentoring. We're looking at peer support programs within a workplace, especially virtually now, which have been very helpful for people just to share stories. A buddy system is a great idea where, you assign one buddy to one specific person, and then the responsibility is that you check in with each other every day in some way and make sure that you're both doing okay. About this time last year, I was consulting with a hospital in New York City, and they had a version of the buddy system called Check You, Check Two. So this was not necessarily the same person every day, but what they encouraged people to do was, as you got up every morning, check in with yourself and say, how am I doing today? And then part of the goal was, as you go through your day, check in with 2 other people. Didn't matter who, and maybe there would be different people every day, and that's part of how we build our network and show people that we're caring, right? It really allows us to share those stories and permit that vulnerability. And of course, creating those holding environments for our personal relationships too. So how do we stay connected with family and friends? How do we help people know we're there for them? Again, that we have their back in some way. And even though we can't physically see them, can we stay connected in other ways? Technology, for all of the frustrations it causes us, has actually given us opportunities to be more connected in terms of texting, emails, videos. My 82-year-old mother is Zooming my children, and really appreciates being able to do that. So, ultimately, even if you're not seeing them, you're going to miss them, but you don't necessarily want to have to worry about people that you don't see on a regular basis. And I would encourage you also to think about adding a laugh or two. The therapeutic benefits of humor have really been well outlined. And then the 4th C is calmness. I want you to think about, how do you maintain calmness during this time? Because feeling upset and anxious is common. And as I've said, we're grieving, we're feeling out of control, we're feeling under pressure, and all of us can exhibit negative attitudes and behaviors, sometimes be critical, sometimes be unpleasant. Like, none of us are at our best at this point. So it's helpful for us to take some time to recognize when others are not being calm, when they're not calm, to invite, to connect with them, and to offer patience and forgiveness for what I call these imperfect moments. But also to take time and recognize when we're not calm, and how can we still try to be respectful and collegial and have some skills to manage during that time. And I know that other speakers today are going to help you, fill your toolbox with some more skills in terms of helping you be calm. But I just want you to think about what those are. And, as I worked with colleagues, I would talk about calming techniques such as breathing exercises, mindfulness, relaxation exercises, visualization, gratitude, spirituality, and those were all amazingly effective. But people would say to me, well, that's great, but I'm not that calm yet. I can't even get into that. So what I started to do is to talk about my ABCs. And I encourage people, the A is just allow those feelings. So if you're not, if you're frustrated, if you're upset, allow it. Now, you want to do it in a safe place with a safe person. And so identify somebody that I would call a vent buddy, allow them to vent to you and you can vent to them. Now, keep this short. If it goes beyond 20 minutes, you really are not getting as much, youthfulness back. So there's some good studies that show that having your feelings for about 20 minutes and having those feelings, allowing yourself to experience them, processing them, and letting them go, right? If somebody is not available for you to vent to, then use journaling, which will also allow you to acknowledge and let go of those feelings. The 4-letter technique is a good technique if you really feel like your feelings are very intense. So instead of just journaling once, you may want to just put that away and then write a second time, a third time, and even a 4th time until, the feelings are less intense. The facts are still there, and you can decide if there is anything that you want to do further, right? So the A is just allow those feelings. People say, okay, I'm still not able to relax right now. The B is burn it off. So think about physical exercise, moving your body in some way. Remember that emotions need motion. So you kind of want to, move your body and imagine those feelings basically flowing through and out of your body as you're moving it in some way, whether it's exercise or it's gardening or it's just putting on some music and dancing. And then the C, the calming exercises, will be much more effective for you. And then finally, the care for yourself. Taking care of yourself first is probably the most important thing that we can do, right? Making time for ourselves. And yet it's not something that we do, particularly when we're busy. We have all these other responsibilities. And a lot of times, we mean to do this, but when everything else is done. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to try and change that, and take care of your own needs first, right? Making sure that you exercise, eat well, sleep well, take breaks. And this feels like a very selfish thing to do. It feels like a luxury. But what I will tell you is that, in fact, when you take care of yourself first, there's actually more of you available for everybody else that's counting on you, right? So in fact, taking care of yourself first is probably the most unselfish thing that you can do. The biggest reason that we can't do it is our guilt. We feel too guilty. So here's my rule for you. If there's something that you're thinking about doing that you know is going to help you feel better, but you're not doing it because you feel guilty, that's the very thing you should do. Okay, just do it. Now, of course, you cannot quote me in a court of law, but realistically, if what you were thinking of doing was illegal, immoral, impossible, irresponsible, it wouldn't even have floated up to the top as a tangible idea, right? So if you're thinking of doing something to help take care of yourself, that's exactly what you should do. I just want to end on this note about self-compassion. I urge all of you to just take note regularly of how you're managing. Notice when your coping skills might be diminished or depleted, and reach out for help. And I want you not just to reach out for help, but to reach in, right, with kindness. You're not to blame. We're all going through this together, and feeling overwhelmed is going to happen to all of us at different points along this. So allow it, expect it, and offer yourself that compassion that you're, busy offering everybody around you, right? So I encourage you to be kind to others and to be kind to yourself. Thank you very much.
It's Elizabeth Manley, 1988 Olympic silver medalist. And you're probably all wondering why I'm on here today, but I was so excited when everyone reached out to me to speak with you today, because I want to share with you a little bit about my experience of not only resilience and getting through mental health and many other issues in my career, but I also wanted to share with you about, what this whole conference is about, and that is compassion fatigue. And a lot of you may not realize, but I was a caretaker for almost 4 years, and it was a very, very difficult time in my life. But let me go back and share a little bit about my story. I wanted to share with you, a lot of you might know who I am already, being here in Ottawa and everything, but this Olympic silver medal, which you all can see, I'm very, very proud of this medal, and it was very exciting for me to win this medal. But I need to share with you, I don't have this medal hanging up anywhere in my house. I have a few photos, things like that, but this medal is wrapped up in, you're not good enough. You're never going to make it. You come from a small town outside of Ottawa. You don't have money, so you're not the image that we want for figure skating. And I went through a very, very difficult time in my career. And I want to share with you about this medal, the night that I won the medal. 2 days after I won the medal, and I know I'm really jumping ahead here because I really want to get to the compassion part. 2 days after I won this medal, I was called by the organization I represented here in Canada. And 2 days after I won this medal, they asked me not to go to the World Championships, which was going to be 3 weeks later. And I remember asking them why they didn't want me to go to the World Championships. And what I ended up getting was they felt that my Olympic medal was a fluke and that I should take the medal and run. It broke my heart because my entire career, I literally was bullied by adults. I was always criticized as an inconsistent skater. I didn't have the body image of what the skating should look like. I needed to be taller, thinner, whatever it might be. And, when I was 16 years old, I completely broke down. And I was diagnosed at 16 with a nervous breakdown, depression, and anxiety. And when I say I had a complete breakdown, I lost all my hair when I was 16 years old. I gained 50 pounds in water retention. And going from specialist to specialist to specialist, no one could diagnose what was happening to me. And I went completely bald. Lost all my hair. It was just, water retention, weight. They tested me for everything. And the reason I'm kind of jumping ahead here is because somebody reached out to offer me help, and we couldn't afford it. My mother and I were on our own. My father was Air Force. He lived in Europe. My brothers were off playing hockey. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing. And my mom struggled with 2 jobs just to keep me in a sport I loved and to support the passion that I had for what I was doing. And then, everything kind of fell apart at 16 years old. I think it was the pressure. I held a lot of guilt on my shoulders. I wanted to keep everyone happy. I wanted to impress everybody. I wanted to be the best. But what I forgot in this whole process was I forgot about me. And when you forget about yourself, you're no good to anyone. And I took skating as a job. And every time I would lose a competition, or I would falter, or I would do something that would put me on a podium, I remember the guilt that I would carry with me of letting everyone down. And at 16 years old, you can imagine the feeling of letting an entire country down is a lot on a young girl's shoulders. And somebody, reached out, offered me help. And I remember at the time saying, no one can help me. I sat on the side of my bed after all this happened, my skates, my costumes, everything were packed away. I had to quit skating. And I remember sitting on the side of my bed and thinking I had nothing left. If my skating was gone, then I didn't have an identity. And I was really, really afraid of that. And the thoughts of the country and everybody around me that I had disappointed would be so much better off without me. And yes, I was that young teen sitting on the side of my bed considering suicide because I felt like I had let everyone down, physically, mentally, everything. Reaching out for the help that I got ended up with me 4 years later, standing on the podium, getting this medal. Now, I want to share with you a little bit that we love this medal. I don't have it hanging up because in the Manley family, this is a medal in life. This is a gold medal in life. This was to stand on a podium for an entire country to tell them that it's okay, that you can have struggles and that you can have the rough times. But if you believe and you love something enough inside and you take care of you, then everything falls into place around you. And I remember after the Olympics, I was fighting the stigma of, it was a fluke. You shouldn't go to the World Championships, take your medal and run. And I remember how brokenhearted I was to the point where I got so mad and I decided that I was going to go to the World Championships 3 weeks later. And I ended up actually skating better. I still came second. So I proved to them that the Olympics wasn't a fluke, but a lot of people felt that at Olympics I should have won, but I think at the Worlds I should have won. I was much better. And that turned me into really wanting to help people. And you know what? Sometimes when we really open ourselves up and try to do so much and try to help people and be there for people and everything, I found with myself that I was starting to lose myself again because I just had this drive and this ambition to work with people and to help people and everything. And I was trying to perform as a professional figure skater, and I was taking care of my mom, and I was doing this. And, I had a million things on my plate. And, with depression and anxiety, you'll go like this. We don't get cured from it, but we learn how to live a fulfilling lifestyle with it. And a life that we're proud of, and a life of success and resilience and everything like that. And that's really what about my story is about. I remember I had moved to Philadelphia to work at a center in Philadelphia. I was coaching figure skating, and this was many, many years after the Olympics. And I had dove into professional skating and to coaching and to working with mental health and to doing so many charitable things and volunteering and the list goes on and on and on. I remember getting a call in Philadelphia. This was quite a few years after the Olympics, and it was my mother, and she proceeded to tell me that she wasn't feeling well and she was very extended. And I remember asking her, what do you mean extend? And she said, I literally look like I could give birth to triplets right now. My mom was in her late 60s. And I remember saying to her, what do you mean? And she said, I'm just really bloated. So I begged her to get to the doctors. She came home from the doctors and she was diagnosed as constipated. And I decided that I needed to go home and check on my mom. So, it was drivable. It was 7 hours door to door. And I remember when I pulled up in my mother's driveway, I had never seen my mother look like this before. She literally was attached from her chin, down to her stomach. She was just so swollen. And I got furious. I was just so upset. Like, how could they diagnose this as constipation? And I remember begging the doctors, like, you've got to get her in, you've got to get her x-rayed, you've got to do something. So that was the beginning of my life as a caretaker. A week later, after getting some tests done and everything, I had gone back to Philadelphia and I got the call with the big C word. So my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. My life changed like that. And this is where I get very emotional, because as a caretaker or someone that gives so much of themselves, it's very, very draining. It's emotionally, it's physically, because you want to do everything perfectly. Within 24 hours, I had packed up my life in Philadelphia, put everything with a storage or a moving company, and I moved back to Canada. And I never left my mother's side for the next year and a half. This was everything from taking her for appointments, for chemo, just checkups, things like that. And I remember we were going to the Kingston Hospital for just a checkup. And my mom really wasn't feeling that great. And they had already gone through the extent of chemo with her. And they noticed when I took her in for her appointment that her lungs were filling up. And they admitted her into the hospital right at that point. I slept in a cot for over 2 months in the hospital with her. I was so grateful to the entire staff and everybody that was part of my mother's team with cancer. But everything happens so fast when you're a caretaker. You're making decisions. You're trying to, make sure that everybody's doing their job. Everybody's on top of everything. Excuse me. And I remember the exhaustion. I remember how I got to a point where I was just a robot. I was in a fog. I was in denial that my mother could possibly be dying. I was in denial of everything that was happening. I was just motivating and inspiring and trying to keep my mom strong. And she progressively got worse. And after just over 2 months of sleeping in a cot and taking care of my mom and, just being there in the hospital, and I literally had given up my entire life. My mom, my mom passed away. And it was, there's so many mixed emotions, right? She was my best friend. She was everything. She was my entire life. And I suddenly felt this complete emptiness. And I remember getting home and, trying to arrange funeral arrangements and everything like this. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror thinking, what happened to me? I just looked terrible. I looked exhausted. I had put a lot of weight on because I was eating junk food in the hospital. I wasn't sleeping. It was really, really hard. And I still to this day have these visions of what my mom must have thought, when she saw me at the end, because, I was exhausted and I was just not capable of doing anything. And not having worked for a year at this point, also was very, very draining for me. After the funeral, which I, kind of like skipped over a little bit, my parents were divorced when I was a very young age, but my father at this time was suffering from Alzheimer's. And so I go right from, this entire year and a couple months experience with my mom. And I remember saying to myself, okay, I got to ship up, pull my big girl pants up, and now I've got to take care of my dad. And I can't be like this for my dad. And, it was all acting. It was going in there with a smile on my face and trying to, be the bubbly Liz that my father always knew. And, but I was numb. I was a robot. I was completely incapable of really giving anything more. And I remember as my father progressively got worse, we had to move him into a home because my stepmother, was his full-time caretaker, along with family coming over and helping when we could. But I remember the exhaustion in her face. And, it was almost like she'd break down and cry when somebody would say thank you to her for everything she was doing. Like if one of us, hugged her and said, we appreciate everything you're doing. We don't take that time to show that appreciation. And, within a year, I lost my mother and then I lost my father. And I look back now and, I look at what's going on in our world today with the pandemic and all our first responders and, everybody that's involved with just trying to keep this world going right now. And I kind of go back to those moments where I feel like I'm just numb again. And I'm just, just trying to get through to the next day. And understanding what my passions were, prior to all this, and that was to help people. But I kind of lost that confidence because when you lose somebody you love so much, you feel guilty that you haven't done enough. And you go through all those stages, right? And I remember feeling the guilt that I couldn't save them. I was in denial with my mom and I couldn't save her. And for years, this went on afterwards. And the memories and the visions and everything continued to just haunt people. I look at what the first responders are going through today, especially in our healthcare system, with nurses and doctors. Like, I can't even imagine, what they see on a daily basis and what they're experiencing and the frustration and everything that we're trying to make our country safe again. And then, the frustrations of people that don't take it seriously and everything. And then there's people like all of you that are just trying to keep your head above water and take care of your loved ones or, your family members, somebody that may be ill. And it can be exhausting, absolutely exhausting. But I want to share with you what I learned the most through, the fatigue and the compassion and everything that I did for years was, if I was no good, then I was no good to them. And I lost myself in that process. And that is the problem with what happens when we're giving 100% to someone or some organization, or we're volunteering, or we're doing whatever we're doing, working in the pandemic grounds, doctors, nurses, lawyers, everybody is, we tend to put all our time and energy into that 100%, but we forget who we are. And when we forget who we are, we have to remember that we're not good for anyone else, and that we definitely have to make ourselves a priority. In the journey of compassion fatigue and everything, that the majority of everyone watching today is on a journey of some sort, is please remember that you're important and that you need to take the time for you. And I remember as a skater, that was one of the things I didn't do as well, as I didn't take the time for me. Yes, I was skating and I was training and I was doing all this, but I never really took the time to be in touch with who I was. And, the result was me having a complete breakdown. And it taught me a lot about myself. And, one of the questions I get a lot is, would I ever turn the clocks back, with my skating and my depression and everything? And I have to be honest with you, I would absolutely not even hesitate and say, no, I would never change the clocks back, because it taught me who I was. And during these times of caretaking with my mother and my father, and, it kind of gave me a bit of an insight of who I was and how much I put 150% into everything and everyone that I'm close to. But during that whole time, I lost myself again. I really did. And I found myself going back and getting help and everything like that, which was great, because I understand and I recognize, I recognize the red flags. If I'm not doing well, I understand that, I am going through a difficult time and I can't do it on my own. And that's what we need to really be aware of, is we can't do everything alone. I felt like that with my parents, that I could do it all, that I could take care of them, and I was going to make everything better. And then when I lost them, I was in such disbelief, because I didn't understand with how much I did, how little sleep I got, how I didn't matter. And I look back now and I wish I had have just maybe given myself a little bit more time so I could be a better caretaker. I'm not saying I wasn't, and I'm not saying anyone that's listening today is not a good caretaker, but what happens is we end up falling apart. And, a majority of you, some of you listening could be a parent, you could be, responsible for caretaking someone, but you have an entire family over here. And what ends up happening is we get so focused in on trying to do our best and trying to heal people and make them better and everything, that we start to lose all those connections with the rest of our family or with ourselves, and we seriously end up falling apart. And so I'm really after all these experiences happened and everything, I realized the importance of working with people and making them understand that they have to be a priority in their lives. Too many of us are here. Okay, we're living. We're not living. Outside of COVID, outside of the pandemic and the lockdowns and everything that we've been going through, we're still here. And I want you all to realize that it's okay to feel, okay, I'm just here, I'm comfortable, I'm tired, I'm drained, I'm not taking care of myself. But you know what? I can get through my days. I'm here. We have one life to live. And that one life is yours. And when you give and you give and you give, please just take that moment to remember there is you. And that's taking care of yourself. That's getting the rest. It's being the best you can be for your loved one or for whoever you may be working through during these times. I know that we have some lawyers that are on here. We have, first responders. We have parents. We have just people that are in a position where they're caretaking. And my biggest advice right now is that we just understand that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to reach out for other help. Never feel guilty about that. I feel guilty that I didn't. I tried to take the whole world on. And I tried not only as an individual at 16 years old, I tried to take a whole world on without asking for help. And then I tried to cure my mother of cancer for 1 year and 2 months, and I never asked for help. And then my father passing away of Alzheimer's and feeling helpless. And through that whole experience, I realized how important my life was and how short life is. And we really need to be grateful, and we really need to look at our days in a new light. My love and my appreciation for all of you, for what you do, and for all the times that we're going through, and the exhaustion and the hours. Please understand that you're important too, and that you need to take that mental health break. You need to take, whether it's an hour a day, whether it's a couple hours a day, but you need to take care of yourself, because when we're not taking care of ourselves, we're just a little less helpful to the ones that really need it from us. And I can't thank you all enough for all that you guys, which everyone that's watching us today is going through. My appreciation and my passion to work with people. Some of you may not know at this point, but I am now a certified life coach, and I'm back living in Ottawa, and I'm presently working with Ottawa Police Association, and I'm working with a lot of officers and a lot of OPA members. And you know what? It's just, I look at their lives and I understand a lot of the things they're going through. Just as if I was to have an opportunity to talk to each and every one of you, there would be a similarity between us all. And we need to unite, and we need to be there for each other, and we need to support each other. And that was one of the reasons why I became a life coach, because I felt like I wanted to be on the team with everybody. I wanted to show the support through my experiences, through my education, through my career, and just really be there for people to have that go-to person to talk to. Because I feel, especially in the situation that we're in today, and a lot of our careers and a lot of what we do in life and the pressures that we have in our life, we don't have a tendency to open up enough and to talk about it. And I encourage each and every one of you, if you are in this stage of compassion fatigue and exhaustion, and just there aren't enough hours in the day, then I encourage you to reach out and to talk to someone, and to have someone listen to you and open up, and just releasing everything in itself is so important for our well-being, our mental well-being, and for whoever we may be taking care of. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Kimberly Sogge. I'm a psychologist with Ottawa River Psychology Group. They're clinical director there, which is a group of 10 psychologists and psychotherapists working in Canada's capital, but we're serving all of Ontario right now. And I'd like to talk to you about your compassionate self-energy. And even if you're the toughest nut in the crowd, I guarantee you have access to this compassionate self-energy, and it's going to be one of your superpowers that will take you through this COVID wave. So let's talk a bit today and do some practices on how to build a bridge to your compassionate self-energy. So again, my training is as a scientist practitioner. So I have a PhD from Texas A&M University, did my dissertation with the Faculty of Medicine at Texas A&M College of Medicine, have worked as the chief of psychology at the Royal Ottawa Healthcare Group and other places. And really what my commitment is right now is clinical work and integrating mindfulness and compassion practices into that work. I would like to acknowledge, you can see in the name of our group, Ottawa River, that where we're practicing is really important to us, and we'd like to acknowledge the land on which we live and work is the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And so this incredible science-based work that we do actually is enlivened and filled with vitality because of where we are practicing. So maybe you had a thought come up of my compassionate self-energy, like who's that? What is that? Is that going to make me soft? Is this some kind of passive thing? And I'd like to say, first of all, no, like none of those myths about compassion are borne out in reality. And also, you are not who you think you are. So yes, compassionate self-energy is an incredibly powerful part of your nervous system, of how you are in the world, even if you're not trained to tap into it. But also, you are not who you think you are. So this is a quote from some of the best researchers in psychotherapy of this century, and that is Teasdale, who's worked with Zindel, Siegel, Mark Williams to develop mindfulness-based cognitive therapy out of CAMH. And they say modern science supports the idea that rather than having a single self, like who you identify as Brenda or as Kimberly or as John, we have multiple selves, which are basically made up of multiple interacting subsystems, like different modes of mind, basically. It doesn't mean that you're a Sybil, like multiple personalities, but you have multiple modes of mind that are all shaped by various stages of evolution. So this is programmed right into your genes, these different mind modes. So I'm just going to quickly name 3 of them because we're really working with training and the compassionate self that is the balancing factor for all of these systems. So you have 3 motivational systems in your body, and they each have their own neurohormonal substrates. And what's amazing about this is each of them has a different mode of mind. And now you might be by temperament or by training really comfortable in one mode, and they're all about our survival. They were given to us by evolution, right? So they're all about, you know, keeping you alive and well and keeping your community alive and well. But each of them creates a slightly different type of perception in the world, like what you're oriented to notice, a kind of thinking, you know, whether you're like narrow or broad in your generation of solutions and strategies, the kind of imagery that might run through your mind, a different way of relating to other people, and a different behavioral tendency. So we can actually feel this just with a little hand gesture exercise. So please hold out your hands and squeeze your fists. So holding that really tight there, and maybe close your eyes and explore how you feel, especially when emotions come up when you really tightly clench your fists. And maybe just name for yourself what the feeling is. Usually people say, tension, anger, fear. Maybe even think of the sound you would make holding your body in this position, like grr, grr. So this is a metaphor for like that threat and drive activation. So now like just open your palms and turn them upward. If you want, close your eyes and just feel your breath. And notice how this makes you feel. Maybe even notice your breathing is different. Your nervous system feels different. Maybe notice what sound the body likes to make in this posture. Usually it's like, so you can feel the parasympathetic nervous system kicking in there. So now extend your arms out like you're reaching out to others. And just notice how that feels. Maybe think of what sound your body would make as you're reaching out. You know, imagine that you like have a favorite pet running towards you. It's like, oh. So just notice there's like that activation of that connection system. Now maybe place one hand on another and slowly bring it to your chest. Just feeling that warmth of the hand against the chest. And notice what feeling comes up there. So usually people report that this feels like safety, calm, maybe feeling loved. So this is the metaphor for that soothing that happens with the activation of the connection and kindness system. So notice the mindsets that come up when we went drive. You know, I have a pretty competitive nature, and I'm sure anyone who has, found their way to a profession as you have, who's, helping their family and loved ones survive during a pandemic, who's figuring out strategies to how to, maybe you've pivoted to online work or figuring out how to school your kids at home. That takes some drive. And the mindset with that is like, I want it, I'm going for it, I'm burning through the obstacles. It's the kind of no pain, no gain attitude of a Nike commercial. But then also notice, for a lot of us, there's like this activation of like, oh my God, like that person breathed on me, or like maybe, terrible things could happen. We worry about the future, our finances. Am I going to have to sell my business? What's going to happen to my parents? This is the activation of the threat system. And basically the mindset is, I don't want it, or I've just got to survive. I'm going to hunker down. And it tends to see self, world, and future as having like limited options. It's just about making it through. But then notice the mindset that comes with that connection, the soothing hands on the heart. There's an openness of the mind of seeing multiple possibilities. There's an approach of, I'm curious, I'm going towards this experience. There's a letting go of needing to have an agenda or solutions. It's like a friend coming in and saying, hey, I'm just here with you. I don't need to fix everything for you. There's a sense of we all belong. I've been saying to a lot of people during this pandemic, we're stronger connected and together. But connection doesn't necessarily have to be through physical touch or physical presence. It's a sense inside of inner safeness, not an effort to control and try to manage all the external circumstances. We all belong. And trust in yourself. I'm okay no matter what. So I had said that each of these have like a different neurohormonal substrate. So when drive is leading, this is what's happening in your nervous system. Dopamine is there. It really feels good, doesn't it, to have mastery? It's all about goals and rewards. I'm going to gather resources, maybe save some toilet paper. I'm going to scan the environment for opportunities. I'm going to plan. I'm going to move towards what I want. I'm going to execute your mission. It's focused on the future. With threat leads, maybe that's more the toilet paper hoarding example. Cortisol is in the system. The mindset is scanning the environment, yourself, your life for threat. There's quite a narrow focus. We can get quite judgmental of ourselves and others. And really the options for the problems that the mind perceives are pretty simple survival options. It's only just about conserving and protecting the system. And the way this shows up in the nervous system may be more in flight and freezing when threat's really leading. And really the mind is focused on the past or worst case scenarios in the future. So maybe are some of you recognizing, oh yeah, I can have all of those mindsets like in 1 minute when my teenager comes home or isn't wearing their mask, or there's some other experience that is a challenge. But here's the third system that often we don't train. We don't talk about how to build bridges to this, but actually this system down-regulates the other two systems so that they can work more effectively. You've maybe all seen the Yerkes-Dodson law of like how stress, when there's too much or too little, there's not optimal performance. You want to have just enough stress, but the compassionate and connection system, your compassionate self, is what keeps that performance at the right level of stress and integrates drive and threat and stays balanced. So oxytocin and vasopressin are the neurohormones that underpin the system. And really, when the compassionate self leads, it's interested in connecting and belonging and just soothing, tending to yourself and to others, caring to, there's an open perceptual capacity, a creative problem solving mode. Things are often deeply consolidated in memory. And there's also a courage, a willingness to go towards and explore a difficult experience internally or in a relationship or in the world. But not just a foolhardy courage, there's a wisdom, a sense of understanding the complexity and interconnectedness of the variables in a problem. And it's very much here, present in this moment. So as I've been saying, the compassionate self balances the threat and drive systems. So there's some really biologically programmed ways, and we've done one of them already, to access this compassion system. And just think of what you would do for someone you loved who'd had a failure or an accident or a setback of some kind. You want to draw close to them. Maybe you'd like place a hand on their back or hold their hand. So soothing touch activates a bridge to the compassionate self. Warmth and connection. So being willing to embrace an experience and just understand and connect without pushing away or attacking it or problem solving as the primary response is the compassionate self system. And then there's a kindness, like a motivation with warmth and encouragement, a desire to see potential manifest. So what's really interesting about the compassion system, it's activated in relationship. And that doesn't mean that it only happens in the presence of other people. We are programmed to be relational beings. So I was just talking to Brenda before this presentation about how in the work that we do, even if we're not someone who's prone to bring work home with us or carry it around in our mind or in our body afterwards, is always co-regulating with other people in the situation that we're in. So if we're dealing with caregiving for someone who's suffering, if we're a frontline worker, if we're a physician running a busy emergency room, if we're a lawyer listening to a difficult client story, even if you're someone who's prone to be quite calm and balanced in that situation, your nervous system is often co-regulating just through the power of mirror neurons with the other being. So our system is walking through the stress cycle with others. So we usually have 3 flows of compassion, how it's activated. So most of us as caregivers and in the professions that you're in tend to be pretty good at self to other. Like we see someone in trouble or we see someone vulnerable and we have this like natural willingness to go towards and to help and to understand and to be non-judgmental. So the self to other flow is pretty easy for about 60 to 70% of the population. Now, the second one, a lot of us have a little more difficulty with, particularly since a lot of our training and our professions gives a lot of reward to activation of drive and threat. So we get really good at activating those systems, but we're maybe not so comfortable being in the receiving end or in the vulnerable position. So another way compassion is activated is learning how to just receive from others to ourselves. So most of us find it easier to activate self to other than other to self, but it's really important that we have balance in these. Now, the last one is where, as a psychologist, I see most of us having the biggest difficulty. Now, about 14% of people find it easier to give to themselves, to others. So I'm not talking to you, you're probably fine. But for a lot of us, we have incredible difficulty activating this really powerful motivational system of the compassionate self when it comes to moments where we're struggling, where we're overwhelmed by the kids being at home, where we're not performing the way that we would like in our job during COVID, where we are suffering from grief or sadness or burnout or overwhelming stress in traumatic or acute situations. We tend to go, because they're just more well-trained, to drive and threat in how we speak to ourselves, how we relate to ourselves, than compassion in our self-relationship. So I'm not knocking these other systems. I just want to say that this training isn't about trying to knock out the capacities that threat and drive give, but often, because we're kind of trained that way, and like I said, we might have a temperamental inclination towards relying on those systems, we kind of have these selves. This goes back to my comment about you're not who you think you are. We all have like these multiple modalities of mind, and I'm just naming them because as soon as you can name and have perspective, so psychological flexibility, one aspect of which is the capacity to shift perspectives, is a huge protector in times of stress. So I'm wanting to name this in a way as a way to reinforce your natural resilience. If you can name these parts, these mindsets when you see them coming up, then right away you can relate to them rather than from them. So the metaphor that I like to give is, it's like if you were looking at the inside of your hands. They were right up against your eyes. All you can see is the inside of your hands. So to broaden your perspective, we're not trying to cut your hands off. We're just taking perspective, backing them down a little bit so we can use them effectively, but we can also see the whole field of information. So there's 2 major parts of protectors in the system that are kind of associated with this drive and threat system. There's the managers, who I like to think of as more about the drive. They're like the little parts of us that are like, what's the plan? I need to analyze this. I need an action strategy. And this is really helpful for survival in the world, except we often apply it to ourselves. What's wrong with me? Why isn't there a plan? Why can't I figure this out? So in that situation, you kind of have to balance the system by asking this part to step back. And there's no reason for it to step back if there isn't a replacement for it that's going to do the job better. So we'll get to that later. The second kind of protector is more the firefighter. So what do firefighters do is they try to prevent or shut down fires. So I like to say firefighters are either blowing things up preemptively, or they're hosing them down with water. So this is what happens emotionally, is a firefighter will either kind of preemptively cause an explosion, will get reactive to some small thing. Hey, you didn't set the table properly, or whatever it is. You didn't sign this document or make the corrections that I asked for. Firefighter will go off. Or, we might be dealing with a difficult situation. We keep suppressing, shooting that flame of emotion and stress with a fire hose, just suppressing it. So those can be really helpful just for getting ourselves through an acute situation. But the problem is that these parts of our minds don't know when to take a break, like, or how to collaborate, and they can get in conflict with each other. So, la voici, qualities of self. So self-energy is what can come in to give some space from these habitual strategies of drive and threat, the protectors of managers and firefighters within us. And here are the qualities of self. Maybe you know someone like this, you admire someone like this, you've read about someone like this. Maybe you've seen moments when these self qualities emerge in you. I know that they're there in everyone listening to this presentation. Quality of self is calm, it's compassionate, it's courageous, it's creative, it's connected, it's confident, knows when it knows, and it has clarity. It can see the complexity of the situation. So coming back, that's self-energy. What's compassion? In the approach that I use in compassion-focused therapy, compassion is understood as the specific attributes and skills of the compassion and connection system. So here are the qualities of compassion: empathy, the capacity to tolerate distress, so to be fireproof, be in the fire but not catching fire, to be sympathetic. I really care. I want to do something to help. To be sensitive, tuned in, that we know we're stressed. When we're stressed, we know others are stressed when they're stressed. To have a caring for well-being, and to have non-judgment. So I've talked a lot about compassion, but I think compassion and the activation of this compassion itself is best experienced. So I'd like to spend the next period offering you an experience of compassion using an inner imagery practice of a compassionate friend. As I said, compassion is in the relational system. So all of us are kind of walking around with other people represented inside us. And one of the bridges into compassion is through this relational network of bringing to mind someone who who embodies this compassionate presence for you. So get into a comfortable place where you are. You can be sitting or lying down, and just gently close your eyes if you like. Maybe take a few deep breaths, settle into your body. So this is a kind of learning that I think is best described by the French verb comprendre. So calm, like becoming one with, connecting with, prendre, picking up, so inviting in this experience into your body. It's not only cognitive, it's not only emotional, it's an integrated, full experience of compassion itself. So I'm going to ring a bell just to invite us into that calm, receptive mode. And you won't hear the bell again until the practice is closing. So 3 rings. Just receive the sound the way you would receive the kind presence of a good friend. Taking a few deep breaths. And if you like, you can see perhaps that I have a hand on my heart. No one's watching. Just go ahead and just place a hand in the center of your chest. Or anywhere else that it's soothing, might be holding your own face, might be stroking a shoulder or forearm. Remember, soothing touch is one of the bridges in to the compassionate connection, oxytocin, the vasopressin system. So we're going to layer on imagery here. I'd like you to bring to mind a place that's really safe and comfortable for you. It might be a beautiful lake in August in Ontario. It might be a mountain cabin or a beach. Maybe a really cozy room, the fireplace. So it can be anywhere at all that you feel reasonably peaceful and safe. So just letting yourself enjoy the feeling of being in this place. And if that is what you need, you can just stay right here, relaxing in this place. It actually is a training because you might have to bring your mind back to this place from the problem solving it wants to do going into the future, or from the worrying about the past. Just invite it back whenever it wanders off. Come here. Like you'd invite a friend in. Come in and sit with me. Just enjoying resting here. And let it be in as much vivid sensory detail as you can. What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you feel in your body? So in this place, soon you'll receive a compassionate visitor, just a warm and friendly presence, a friend. And this friend embodies the qualities of compassionate self. They are wise. They're strong. They deeply care about you, and they have this unconditional acceptance and love. So see if you can bring to mind, in your mind's eye, an image of this person. Maybe they're a spiritual figure or a wise teacher, a mentor, a person from your past, like a grandparent. Or they might have no particular form. Maybe they're more like light or a warm presence. So bringing to mind a being who cultivates that sense of being at ease in a friendly presence. So this compassionate friend cares deeply about you and really wants you to be happy and free from unnecessary struggle. Just breathing here, relaxing in this safe place. And you might choose to go out from your safe place and welcome them in at the door, or you may invite them in. This compassionate friend might come in. So take that opportunity now. Then I want you to place yourself in just the right position in relation to your compassionate friend. So you might, for you, have a safe COVID distance, if you like, or this is a good friend, invite them right into your bubble and you're sitting really close, whatever feels right for you right now. And I'd like you to imagine them in as much detail as you can. Really feeling what it's like to be in their presence. And there's absolutely nothing that you need to do except experience the moment. So this compassionate friend is wise and understands exactly where you are in your life journey. So they might want to tell you something, and that something is just what you need to hear right now. So take a moment and see and hear, deeply listening with your whole body, what the compassionate friend might have to say to you. If no words come, that's okay. Sometimes it's more like a transmission. You just get something from being in the good company of this friend. So this is a gift in itself. And maybe there's something you would like to say to this compassionate friend, and they are a friend who listens deeply. No agenda, they just completely understand. So is there anything you would like to communicate or express? So this friend may also want to leave you with a gift. Something you can hold in your hand, or a material object. So it might just appear in your hands as you hold them out. So it's something that has special meaning just for you. And if something appears, what is it? Maybe turning it over in your hands, exploring it. We'll take a few more moments to just enjoy the presence of this friend. To really enjoy what it's like to be present together. And as you enjoy each other's company, maybe allow yourself to realize that this friend is actually a part of you. All the compassionate feelings and images and words that pass through your experience today flow from your inner wisdom energy, your inner compassion energy, your compassionate self. So when you're ready, just allow the images to dissolve in your mind's eye, remembering that compassion and wisdom resources are always there within you, especially when you need them the most. You can call on this compassionate friend energy, the presence of your own compassionate self, anytime you wish, anytime you need it. So maybe just feeling your feet on the floor, your body on the chair. Feeling your breath moving. Noticing breath has been there the whole time we've been practicing. Supporting you on the in-breath, soothing you on the out-breath. This compassionate connection and presence is programmed right in to your body. So maybe you just let yourself savor what just happened there. Maybe reflecting on the words that came to you, the object that was given to you. And finally, letting go of this compassionate self-imagery practice and just letting yourself feel whatever you're feeling. Letting yourself be exactly as you are. And the sound of the bell will just signal a transition out of this practice. So I just like to highlight that this compassionate self-energy is available to all parts of you. And a lot of the work that I and my colleagues do is about cultivating these bridges between parts of self to this compassionate self-leadership. I'd like to read you a poem from Mark Nepo. We waste so much energy trying to cover up who we are, when beneath every attitude is the want to be loved, and beneath every anger is a wound to be healed, and beneath every sadness is the fear there will not be enough time. Our challenge each day is not to get dressed to face the world, but to unglove ourselves, or I might say unarmor ourselves, so that the doorknob feels cold, the car handle feels wet, the kiss goodbye feels like the lips of another being, soft and unrepeatable. So just noticing what happened in this practice here, and know that you are the one you've been waiting for. You can tap in to this powerful motivational system within you. And what's beautiful about this is you can let your drive, let your self-protective and easily activated threat system be led by this powerful motivational energy of compassion and connection. So thank you so much for your practice here today. If you'd like to contact me, again, I'm Kimberly Sogge. I'm a psychologist with Ottawa River Psychology Group. There's my email, our practice phone number. If you want to check out the practice, I'll be teaching a compassion course and a mindfulness course coming up in May. I usually teach it 3 times a year, both courses. And if you want to learn a little bit about me, there's my website. But most of all, I really thank you for being willing to build a bridge to strengthen these neural pathways to access your own compassionate energy. This really is what can carry you through. I like to think of it as ballast on the boat that's sailing through the storm of COVID. So may this be a gift to you, to those around you, and to the world. And everyone, stay safe and stay connected. Bye-bye.
On behalf of the Nicholson Gluckstein firm, I just wanted to thank each one of our attendees today for joining our very first Ottawa Compassion Fatigue event. I also wanted to extend a big thank you to our speakers. We hope that they have imparted some useful information and wisdom that you can take away to help you with your own self-care, as well as manage the challenges that come with caring for individuals with different and ongoing needs, particularly during these unique times that we are living in. We hope that you will join us again for this event in the future, whether it's by Zoom or hopefully back in person. Thank you and have a good afternoon.